But listen, there's nothing more exciting in the game than watching the ball hit the back of the net and everyone around you erupting into pure ecstasy. Unfortunately, most goalkeepers do not get this feeling due to the fact that they're usually over 100 yards away from all of the action. And we already spoke a little bit about the first ever goal in MLS history, a long bomb forward by New York, New Jersey's Danny Sapero, which bounced over the head of the goalkeeper off of the hard Giant Stadium turf and flew into the goal. However, there was one other instance where an MLS goalkeeper experienced the overwhelming joy of celebrating a goal, and that was Will Hesmer. The longtime Columbus Crew goalkeeper can add his name to these ranks alongside Sapero, but he might just have a claim for scoring the best goalkeeper goal in MLS history. For you see, he didn't get lucky with a gust of wind or a strong turf bounce over the head of an onrushing and unaware opposing goalkeeper, but he scored a true striker's finish that day. And that day was back on October 16th, 2010, where the Columbus Crew were taking on Toronto FC in the second to last game of the season. Now, I wish I could sit here and tell you that this game was a fierce battle for the final playoff spot, but it wasn't. Because of the way that MLS did their playoff system, by this point, Columbus had clinched its playoff spot, while Toronto had been eliminated in a historically bad Eastern Conference where exactly zero teams outside of the top two auto qualifiers made the postseason. For those of you wondering, the top two in each conference made the postseason, and then it was the next four best. So it could have been from any conference, and the East was so bad, they had zero wild card participants. So it was Red Bull and Columbus taking on the Western Conference for MLS supremacy. Now, that being said, this was still a fight for pride, and actually, there was something in it for Columbus because if Columbus had won the match, they could have topped the East and had a different playoff outlook. So there was still a lot to be had in the outcome of this match, which started brilliantly for Columbus as they jumped out to a 1-0 lead off of a Chad Marshall goal. He rose up highest to meet a Guillermo Barros corner, knotted it off the crossbar, which hit John Conway's back and in. Maicon Santos, an MLS journeyman in his own right, would level the game with a left-footed rocket from outside of the box just 15 minutes later. Toronto would keep the pressure as Jacob Peterson, yes, that Jacob Peterson, tapped home a Nicholas Lindsay cross just before halftime to give TFC a 2-1 lead heading into the break. Then things would get fun. As the game kicked up in intensity, lifelong MLS troublemaker Steve Lenhart got into it with the TFC goalkeeper John Conway. After some off-the-ball ruckus, both players were sent off from the match, leaving the game to be played 10v10. In subs Milos Kocic, a TFC goalkeeper who was in the squad for the very first time that match day, who was called into action for the last 17 minutes of the game. And if you think a goalkeeper who gets subbed into a match is not going to get tested, you have not met your soccer gods yet. With just seconds left in regulation, Columbus were awarded a corner kick, and up comes Will Hesmer to try and get the goal to bring Columbus level and keep pace with Eastern Conference leaders RBNY. The ball is swung in on top of Kocic, who flaps at it with his top hand, misses the ball, and causes the defender to flub a headed clearance, falling right to Hesmer's feet. Now, most goalkeepers in this situation would panic, and he would just kick it as hard as he could and see what happens. But instead, he took a deft touch to bring it down to his favored right foot. And instead of just bombing it, he lifted up his foot and paused to let the defenders go to ground or move around to see if he could open up a space for get a chance at goal. Then he toe pokes the ball towards the goal, deflects off a TFC player sliding to ground to block the shot, and it trickles over the line. He peels off celebrating as the Toronto FC players hold their head in their hands and their fans look out on the pitch in disbelief. The score would end 2-2, which was massive because Red Bull drew their game in hand, meaning that if Crew won and Red Bull either lost or draw, they would take the first spot in the East. However, it wasn't meant to be, as Red Bull would pick up 3 points on the final day and finish in the top spot in the Eastern Conference. However, in the book of MLS history that we are rewriting, when ranking MLS goalkeeper goals, Hesper might not be able to say he did it first, but he might just be able to say that he did it better.
This story almost had the perfect ending if it wasn't for Red Bull ruining it. Typical Red Bull fashion.
You rotten kids and your stupid dog.
Yeah, what's the point? You're not gonna go win the cup. You guys can't do that anyway.
Just wait, 2025 is our year, baby.
And I've been hearing that every year since I've been following this league.
And you're
We're
gonna keep hearing it.
we're approaching 10 years of having heard that. So, I mean, happy almost 10-year anniversary of saying
Isn't
that.
that crazy that we're gonna be on this podcast like until Red Bull win the cup? That's the only time we can stop, by the way. I don't know if I told you that.
I guess this podcast never ending.
That's right.
Man, that's tough news for me. But I'll tell you who No, I can't even. I was like, I'll tell you who's never ending scoring, and that's Birhim Diop against San Jose. That was the stretch of a lifetime trying to make that one.